relationship is that I have yet to meet Alana in person. So actually, I think she's tall, blonde, and about 6'4", 6'2". Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Besides being the fact that I can't see her in person, I also can't see her on the screen either. So
we'll just go.
So I always like to give it a very positive direction, but no, it'll be great when we finally get a chance to meet in person on campus. And we're moving, if those that were familiar with our original office, we moved across the street into Ritter Annex now, and it's all new renovated space. So we're very excited about our opportunity to move back in there. So looking forward to that. A little bit about me. I've been with TechOWL, which used to be Pennsylvania's Initiative on Assistive Technology. We still kind of use that name in some of our documentation. However, we rebranded in 2018 to TechOWL, and Alana already explained what TechOWL stands for. And I've been there since 2013 when I graduated from a master's in low vision therapy from Salus University, which previously was known as the Pennsylvania College of Optometry. And I have certification from the Academy for Certification for Vision Rehabilitation and Education Professionals. We like long titles. As a low vision therapist, as well as a assistive technology instructional specialist. In fact, I was the first CADIS in the state of Pennsylvania. I got grandfathered in for the hours preparation because I've been involved in this field for over 25 years. So with that said, I took the beta test and everything went well. So all things considered, that's why I was one of the first ones in Pennsylvania to have that certification. So my background and experience is in blindness and low vision. I've been teaching computer access technology as well as low technology, as people like to call it low tech. I call it simple techs, and some simple solutions that people can use for vision loss. So that's kind of where I come from as far as education and my experience more recently. But prior to that, besides teaching computer technology at a couple agencies for the blind, I also had my own small retail store called Easy2See Products in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, in Wayne. And, being a niche market, it was tough to keep it overhead. So we moved into a nonprofit status and it became a consulting business. And anyone who knows who's tried to be a sole proprietor nonprofit, you spend a lot of time trying to get funds to keep it going and less time consulting. So with that said, when the opportunity came up after I graduated from grad school, to join TechOWL, or DIAT at the time, I took advantage of it. And I said, this is a great opportunity. And I really appreciate the experience because, my specialty, again, being in blindness and low vision, although I became an ATP for a while, I had certification from RESNA. I dropped it because I have too many certifications. So it gave me a generalist background. So it's really helpful to have this team approach that we have at TechOWL. Everyone has something to contribute. Obviously, Alana has great experience as an OT. We've got speech and language pathologists and augmented communication who are specialized in augmented and alternative communication. And we also have hearing assistants. Stacy has her background in hearing. Obviously, I have vision loss, and we have physical motor control and also computer access. So all things considered, we have a diverse skill set that everyone comes to us. And so I learn something new every day. And I honestly say that I do learn something new from my colleagues every day. And so I think this is a great opportunity to get together, especially with OTs. I have a fondness for OTs because one of my board members on my nonprofit foundation was an OT. And she started coming to me when I had my retail store, and she expressed a lot of interest in low vision because she was working with a lot of the aging population. And so we kind of became friendly. And so we continue on working together, at least when we were on the board. And I do occasionally still hear from her on Facebook and whatever. I get notices from her. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to start kind of considering this from a lifespan type of approach. And as a low vision therapist, of course, obviously my tendency is to talk about vision stimulation when you're talking about babies, how to stimulate the whole multisensory approach. And so that could be anything from having the first toys, for example, being something that's easy for them to recognize, black and white, commonly primary colors. When you ever paint your baby's nursery, you know, those pastel colors, it doesn't matter to them because they can't see that color palette. They can see primary colors and they can see the high contrast of black and white. So a lot of the early education toys, you'll see that that's kind of where they kind of go in that direction. I also talk about incorporating things that make noise. So rattles, believe it or not, any kind of balls with bells, anything like that, because it actually brings their attention by the hearing, and then they focus by looking. So it's a combination of activities you can do with small children, or excuse me, I should say infants, that can actually stimulate the vision and also stimulate attention, which is all part of what you're doing in the growing process in the development of a new, again, an infant into toddler. Now, I know I'm talking fast too, so if I need to slow down, let me know.
No problem. Thanks, John.
Okay. One of the questions that came in from the list was a question about a preschooler with a 2.5-year-old with cortical vision impairment. And that is a really kind of a broad area. And again, going back to the whole vision stimulation. So if there is any functional vision, it's been determined that there is, vision stimulation is priority. So we've tried to find activities and toys that would actually stimulate the vision for them to have an interaction, a cause and effect type of activity. However, the question was directed specifically to arts and crafts. And that coloring, that's an activity that most preschoolers get involved in. And so I had a little fun this afternoon. I was digging out all my fun resources and what would I do if I was presented with this child? And I'm a mother of 3 kids. They're all adults now, waiting to be a grandmother, and someday. And when I thought about what I did with my own kids, a lot of the activities can be used by any child unless they have additional disabilities that we need to take into consideration. So if they have some complex body issues in addition to the cortical vision impairment, then we may have to adjust some of these suggestions. But even though this may not be considered technology, to me it is, because it's all the way you determine what kind of, is it a tool or a technology? And one of the suggestions that I thought of right away was as far as coloring. They do make raised line coloring books, and you can get them from National Braille Press. You can also get them from the National Federation for the Blind Independence Store, I think they call it. They have, and I think you can even get some on Amazon for that matter. So they are out there. So raised lines would allow them to have that same interaction with the form, although they're feeling it with their fingers to follow the shape. And I kind of got fun thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great to do this with those Crayola scented markers? If the child is, again, supervised, because we're talking a 2.5-year-old, scented markers are actually kind of fun because, they associate that, they associate the smell with the color. If they have any color contrast that they can pick that up, it's, again, a multi-sensory type of experience. You can make your own raised line drawings. They're called raised line drawing boards, and they're also available online. I saw some on Amazon. They also have them as specialty catalogs. It was listed as independent living aids catalog as well as maxi aids. Catalog do have raised line boards. So that can either you can create the raised line drawing, or as the child gets better hand-eye control, that they can actually, use it creating their own drawings. And then I got really carried away and I really started digging into things that my kids like to do, and they like to mess around with paint too. And so how would best for, besides finger painting, which I never had a problem with, by the way, it always washes off. And I would recommend they maybe using sponges. They have cutout sponges for kids, toddlers and preschoolers that are in the shapes of different kinds of animals or geometric shapes. So that can be kind of fun because they can easily tactily feel the shape of the sponge before they put it into the paint and apply it to the paper. It's one way to get paint on there, and they do wash out with just soap and water, and you let them air dry. So that's another kind of arts and craft activity. And last but not least, Wiki Sticks, which is WIKKI Sticks. And they are a tactile way to make raised lines or any kind of craft drawing with it for that matter. And what Wiki Sticks are, they're actually colorful yarn that's been coated in wax. So they're bendable, so you can put it in any shape. I know a lot of O&M instructors, orientation and mobility instructors, will make tactile maps with them. So we kind of go across the lifespan. And I encourage using multisensory, especially with the early childhood, because it gives them an advantage later on if they have to do rely on other tactile means such as Braille. It puts up that pre-Braille skills if they develop good tactile identification. So that would be what I'd recommend, going into the preschool level. And another thought I came across was using the craft foam, those little stick foam pieces that you can get. You can also get them pre-cut in shapes so that they can identify the shape. So, they can be bright colors as well if you we're still looking for, again, that contrast sensitivity issues going up. So, okay, now we're talking about going into school. And so socialization is also very difficult for kids that can't make that visual contact. So a lot of play skills, especially if we're going into school, shouldn't allow for them to have the same interaction. I'm of an age, oh, by the way, my vision loss is a gradual loss. I started losing my vision at the age, I believe at 9, but it wasn't diagnosed till I was 13. And I was, again, legally blind at 16. And then I've lost more vision. So at this point in time, we call it finger count and hand motion. So there's not a whole lot of vision, but I do still see some large shapes. But thinking back to when I was in school, some of the things that were difficult for me were activities that involved, again, hand-eye coordination. So if it was a matter of catching a ball or a matter of, I'm trying to think that, but they used to call me scabby knees because I was always tripping and scraping my knees. That was my brothers and sisters. How kind were they? But the point being is that there were some things that the teachers could have observed that they kind of maybe at that time didn't know enough to recognize that there were some differences there. And so there were probably the first challenges I had in recognizing some of my friends, from far away. And again, some of the, athletic activities were a challenge for me. Then it got to a point where I could, think about it in first and second grade, you're probably reading large print anyway. So that wasn't as much of a problem. I learned to read using print. However, as time went on, I needed, and this reading sizes, font sizes got smaller, it became more and more difficult for me. And as a low vision therapist, I can tell you that one of the compensation skills you get is that you start holding things closer. especially if you have a central vision loss like I had myself. By pulling it closer, you're actually making your eyes become your own magnifier. So it's actually enlarging the image on the retina so that they can see it appear larger so that I could see it. So I was the kid in the classroom that had her nose in the book, literally, by the time I was in 3rd or 4th grade. So it was a challenge for me. Now, hopefully there are more recognition of these issues coming on, so that when people recognize that they see this behavior, that they can then alert first the family, then the doc, then seek the doctor, go with an intermediate unit approach and have supports for the child in the classroom. It could be as simple as moving closer to the blackboard. It could also, or whiteboard now, or it could be also using some magnification devices. So that would be someone in low vision. Obviously, if the child has a progressive vision loss or has very limited vision early on, the introduction of using Braille is very, very important. So there are some Braille technologies out there that you can start out with the simple using a slate and stylus. And you can get accessible materials already. There are some Braille books out there, childhood books that you can obtain. American Printing House for the Blind has a lot of resources for children's K through 12, as far as reading material and other types of reading and writing implements for either low vision or someone who's introduction to Braille. So, that's moving along in that lifespan. Then you start getting into some of the, again, I call it the reemergence of the social skills again. Teenagers have a real tough time when, especially if they're new to vision loss, because a lot of these conditions can develop. Myself as an adolescent, is when I lost most of my vision. Well, I was legally blind at 16, so 20/200 at that point. And things that you take for granted in conversation. I can't tell who's talking to me sometimes if they're unless I'm directly in front of them. So with that said, there are some of the social issues. So kind of combating that is at the same time you're maybe using some alternative devices. Yeah, I felt like the geek, no question about it, when I would be using either the very strong reading glasses or using a magnifying glass, or the fact that I used large print books. I felt out of place, no question about it. But at the same time, it did allow me to progress. So if I was working directly with an adolescent, I'd find the common ground of an activity or a process that would work best for them to be comfortable using the equipment. And today is a great time to have vision loss in some ways, if you can say that, because a lot of the mainstream technology that all of us use have accessible features. And I use my computer myself. I use a screen reader, JAWS for Windows, because I use a Windows computer. I do use VoiceOver on my phone. I have an iPhone, and I'm starting to get used to Chromevox on a Chromebook. So again, there are many magnification features that are built into these devices. So when you're talking about an adolescent, you're trying to find the common ground. What's the tool that other kids are using, and can that be made accessible? Because again, that helps with that whole self-esteem issue in adolescence for them to be able to accommodate. The earlier you introduce assistive technology to a child, the better off they are going to be accepting it, even as they go through those. I said, I don't want to live through my kids turning 13 ever again. I'm glad that's over with, because 13 at that age was very difficult for a lot of kids that don't have a disability. But if you have a vision loss, it's a particularly difficult time in adjusting to a change in your vision. So with that said, keeping that in mind, trying to always start with the simple first. As simple can be something, again, large print. It could be bold line paper. It could be, again, I don't like Sharpies because they stink and they're permanent, but there's a lot of bold line marker pens that are out there that are a little more accessible, shall we say, and a little bit easier on the self-esteem using those. So start with that. Simple modifications in the classroom, again, sitting them close to the blackboard, avoiding glare spots if they have issues that would involve that. But also using some of these additional type of devices in the classroom, including I had a handheld telescope that I used to read the blackboard with all through college. I used that as well as other accommodations. So again, sometimes starting simple, use what's already available in the classroom. Again, could be seating, it could be, again, using magnification or using large print. I always like to say too, if we're working with teachers is, Alana does a great job of describing what's on the screen. And likewise with teachers when they're working with in a classroom using either a presentation board or a whiteboard, I encourage them to also verbalize what they see. It doesn't just help the kid with vision loss. It also helps the kid with learning disabilities. So I put it in that perspective is sometimes giving that actual confirmation of what they're seeing for a person with a learning disability actually helps them comprehend. Likewise, with a student with vision loss, if they're using technology, even though they can see the print, sometimes having that audio reading it aloud to them makes a big difference for their comprehension. They're seeing the word and they're hearing it at the same time. They're making that connection both visually and also with their hearing so that the comprehension goes up. So try all kinds of alternatives when you're working with the kids, especially when they're school age, so that it's a mix. My biggest regret in life is that I never learned how to read Braille. No one would ever predicted that I needed to use it. How much do they know about progressive vision loss back in the 1960s? But with that said, I think having that as an extra toolkit is very important. So now we're talking, moving on, going into post-secondary. AT and post-secondary education is vitally important. I mean, it is so in high school, but incredibly important once they go on off to post-secondary education, whether it be a community college or a four-year academic institution. They need to know how they're going to be getting their material. How are they going to access the information? How are they going to complete their assignments? How are they going to, participate in a classroom? All those issues can definitely make a big difference for someone if the right AT is considered. And so I would recommend someone going into post-secondary, first off, they should have independent computer skills. So whatever they're using in the school, whether they're using Google Classroom or if they're just using to prepare documents, having good foundation in using their assistive technology, whether it be magnification or a screen reader, that they're pretty comfortable and competent with it. Independence is very important by the time they get to post-secondary. Even though you have support services at colleges and universities, they're not doing your homework for you. They're not doing the reading for you. You need to be able to do that on your own. And I've worked with individuals as they were heading off to college. One of the questions I always ask is, how are you going to get your textbooks? And, I'll never forget one student in particular said to me, well, they're just going to give them to me in as digital. Okay. What kind of digital format are they going to give it to you? Oh, well, they're going to scan it in. Okay. So I ended up talking to the university's disability office, and it was very frustrating because they were using a Kurzweil software that wasn't necessarily designed exclusively for the blind. He had some low vision, so it was possible he could navigate with this particular software. But the odd thing about it was they wouldn't let him install it on his own computer. So he was then required to go to the library and use that, Kurzweil software to read his textbooks at the library. And I said, that doesn't make sense. My kids are in college. They're not going to be, going to the library. They're studying at 2 a.m. Come on, the library's closed. And then they said, well, we can put it on a computer in the dorm in a central location. I said, but then the kids that are playing video games, you're going to have to kick them off until so you can read your textbooks. To me, that was not a great compromise, not an accommodation. So I ended up, negotiating with them, and they ended up compromising, giving them a read-only version, so that when the textbooks were sent to him, that he could open up in that software on his own personal computer. So sometimes it takes a lot of negotiations, but it also takes for a part of advocacy. And that's what I try to encourage the students as they're heading off, that you have to have your advocacy skills as well, that people are they don't assume what you need. You're going to have to ask what you need and what works within that environment. The compromise here was that they provided the read-only version of the software, so he couldn't annotate his own notes in that software, which I thought was unfair, but it was the compromise that we kind of accomplished there. So he was able to use his magnification software and this scan and read software that was going to be provided for his textbooks. So then we talk about using, again, online platforms, the learning media platforms. Temple University uses Canvas. They've moved away from Blackboard. This summer, I taught a course at Salus University, and they use Blackboard. So I had to go back to learn Blackboard again. So, with that said, having that ability to be able to use your screen reader or to use the magnification software with those type of platforms is very important. So I try to encourage the students to at least try and either take a course or have sample training course sent to them so they can access prior to starting with their full course load on campus, so they're not always 2 steps behind the other students because they're trying to get caught up in learning how to use the platform with their assistive technology. So they're the kind of advices that I give there. You also can get books, as we all know, in alternative formats, such as books from Learning Ally. There are human narrated books. They do concentrate a great deal on textbooks. Bookshare, one of my favorite ones, because Bookshare provides you the opportunity to see it and hear it at the same time with their collection. And they're getting better at the post-secondary. For a long time, they were really K-12 mostly, but they've gotten, again, a lot more professional level and post-secondary level textbooks on there now, in addition to pleasure reading. And I encourage people to not only concentrate on their textbooks, but do the pleasure reading, because that also allows you to have the opportunity to practice without having the pressure of, again, studying at the same time. So they're 2 of my very favorite. And of course, the National Talking Book Service, the Library for the Blind, has narrated books as well. So I always say, never give up. There's always a way to get the books. When I was in graduate school, I wouldn't say none, but several of the books were not available from any of those sources. So I ended up going through the disability services. And since I had a documentation of a print disability, they would contact the publisher, and I got a copy of a digital form of the textbook. I had to purchase the textbook and show a receipt that I purchased it in print. So I have some pristine textbooks, by the way, because I never opened them. I just have the books, but I also had them then sent to me through the disability office in a digital format that had optical character recognition performed on it, which in some cases had a little bit of errors in there, but you make do. So you fill in the gaps where you need to when there's an error in the recognition. But that, again, that's another resource for the post-secondary education is that if books are not already available, then in an alternative format that you can work with your disability service office to request it in a digital format. So they're already using a computer technology, using either screen magnification or screen reading, they can access the textbooks that way as well. So there, that's another alternative. I work primarily, at this point in my career, with older adults. Adults, maybe work age adults as well as older adults. And a lot of them are new to vision loss due to conditions like age-related macular degeneration. A lot of their struggles are around the home, and many of them are retired. So they want to continue with their community activities. And so a lot of times I have to come up with both some simple solutions around the home and also some, again, communication is also part of it, and computer access seems to be a lot of the interest. And right now, especially during this time of quarantine, we really needed to have that access through technology. So, going through that with them could be as simple as having a big button phone so they can call out. Also having some ways for them to connect with others through either a tablet or a computer with all the accessibility features enabled, or if need be, added assistive technology. Number one question I often get from providers is, service providers is, well, why do I need assistive technology software if indeed these devices, mainstream devices, already have accessibility? And I always say it's a good question. However, there are times, and I'm thinking of especially those in the workplace, that where the built-in accessibility does have its limitations. And so you may need to have specialized AT software, excuse me. For example, I use, again, JAWS for Windows. And if indeed there was a situation where, fortunately, for the most part, most of my activities I can accomplish rather independently. But if indeed there was more complex things I had to deal with, like maybe even a more complex database than what we're dealing with at times, I might have to have what they call scripts created. So that would be a code that's put into the screen reader so that it provides additional keyboard access to either a particular area in a proprietary software. So there's always going to be a need for specialization. When I talk about screen magnification, the built-in screen readers have gotten better. Screen magnifiers have gotten better. However, if you really need very large magnification, and I say large magnification on a computer is anything past 4x magnification, 4 times enlargement on the computer screen. Once you get past that, it will definitely start to pixelate. So, every image on the computer screen is a series of dots, whether it be an image or it be a digit, any kind of font, they are just a series of dots. And so when you enlarge it, you're also enlarging the spaces between the dots. So with screen magnifying software, the ones that you would purchase, they have features that will fill in those dots between, again, the white spaces between the dots. So it becomes smoother. So sometimes bigger isn't always better. If it's bigger, it's blurrier. So with that said, that's why you would think about using some type of proprietary, third-party software, like a screen reading software or a screen magnification software to be added to the device. I've talked about mostly communication and, classroom activities, but I never want to forget that it doesn't matter if they can't get from point A to point B. And so orientation and mobility is very, very important as part of the skills that someone needs to acquire. So some of the technology that's out there to assist in that, although obviously we all know about the white cane, which is a a device to define a clear, safe path for someone to walk. It does require you to have training by a professional orientation mobility specialist. That's important. Then we talk about, I have a guide dog. His name is Bob. He was just here a minute ago.
I heard
But
it.
you heard the tinkle of his chain. Yeah. Yeah, he goes by and says hi sometimes. Anyway, he's my guide dog. He's my third. I've had guide dogs for 20 years now. And so that's another mobility. It's not a technology. That's an assistant, I like to say. He's my assistant. However, it doesn't help. He can't read street signs for me. Now, I know Bob's really smart, and he is pretty smart. He does recognize locations because they've been there before, but he can't read a sign. Although his predecessor, Johan, one day they moved the bus stop right in my neighborhood down further in the block. And I said to my dog, I said, "Oh gosh, Johan, they moved the sign. I have no idea where the bus stop is." And he started trotting down the road. And I said, "Okay, nothing ventured, nothing gained." So I just followed him, and he stopped right below the sign. So even though I say they can't read a sign, they do sometimes seem to amaze me. He made that, I guess because I talk so much to my dog, that he made that connection and recognized that what I was looking for was the bus stop sign. So, but normally speaking, I need to know what street, what direction, what street you're crossing. I need to have good mapping skills myself, either a mental map, but also some identification of where I am in space as far as where I'm traveling. So I do rely on some of the GPS types of apps. I prefer the simpler, the better. Because of the fact I don't need too much points of interest. I don't need too much chatter in my head as I'm traveling. I do recommend, if you are going to be talking about this with any of your customers, that you consider having either an open ear headphone, like a bone conduction headphones, or I happen to use the Apple AirPods, and I put it on transparency mode so that I can hear the ambient sounds as well as the GPS. In the summertime, I love to use my Bose sunglasses. So all the sound is coming through the temples, so my ears are completely free to hear other noise as well. So again, those GPS are great as long as they're not, blocking out the awareness of the environment. So you got to keep that in mind when you're talking about this, but it really does help me determine which direction I'm traveling, what the cross streets are. So if I pre-plan my trips, then I can rely on that for, again, using the GPS for the navigation. I have used the turn-by-turn navigations to get to points of interest. Blind Square is a really good example of that. So if things are already recorded in a map in Blind Square, actually the Howard Gittes Student Center was in Blind Square, I found out when I tested it one day. So that was where our office used to be. And so there are certain locations that will be announced. There are more and more apps coming out all the time. Sometimes even, again, just using Google Maps or the Apple Maps, for example, can give you enough information to do pedestrian turn-by-turn directions. So you can get by with it. But that's critical for people that are going to be going out on their own, going off to college or going out into the workplace, is to have that ability to travel independently. I rely heavily on the SEPTA app, which is obviously the transportation authority here in southeastern Pennsylvania, so that I can travel to work. I check the train schedules, bus routes, and that app is accessible using a voiceover on my iPhone. So for me, apps a lot of times are my primary go-to as far as AT. And I use it for anything from, again, traveling, getting train schedules to GPS to reading my email, pretty much everything all day long. I guess my chart for my contacting my doctor, reading my test results. So apps that are accessible are probably the #1 recommendation I give, even across ages. Even when they're really young, we're talking about that vision stimulation. There's vision stimulation apps out there. So relying on what's already available in the mainstream, I think is very important for us to consider. I'm thinking about that adolescent again, pulling out an iPad or an iPhone, even though it may be talking to them, they might have headphones on, you would, so no one else hears it. Or if they're using the, magnifier on it or the zoom, enlargement on there, it's not quite the same as having an external device. It's something that everybody else is using, and it's becoming more and more possible to do it with, again, the advent of all these apps that are out there. So I'm going to stop talking.
So you're amazing.
If we can get some questions, it'd be great.
Yeah. Well, first of all, a couple of things that I'll mention. So someone messaged me in the chat that you are fabulous and a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure everyone's feeling that way.
Thank you.
I'll say #2, that I know for some people not having slides might be difficult, that you might be used to like that visual input, but obviously Julianne just like has everything in her brain. I can totally understand needing slides. So I'm going to put together just a couple, text and some images to go along with what Julianne has said tonight, and that I'll include that in my follow-up email, so you have a little visual. We accommodate everybody. And I was going to say, Julianne, unless someone else wants to chime in with a pressing question, they are welcome to, but I don't know if you got a chance to do a basics of what is a screen reader. And I'm wondering if there may be people that don't have that baseline. So if you want to just do a quick screen reader 101 tutorial.
Okay. Well, obviously we talked about screen magnification first, and that would be rather apparent. Things to consider with a screen magnifier is that the larger the magnification, the more real estate it takes up on the screen. So if you imagine an icon, your desktop icons, whether you be in Mac or in Windows, and the larger you make those icons, the more it's going to take up on the screen. So when you magnify it, it comes to a point where they have to use the mouse to find another icon. So they have to move the focus of the computer or move the cursor over. So that's part of the consideration of when is it time to go from a screen magnifier to a screen reader. And there are some great alternatives out there so that you can actually use a screen magnification as well as having either speech support, as I like to call, or a screen reader. An example of screen magnification with speech support would be a product such as Zoom Text, or Zoom Text enlarges everything on the screen, but you can also add what they call the reader, which is not the screen reader. It is just, it gives on-command verbal, information. So it's not going to tell you everything that's on the screen. It is more directed, and you can pull up different features to read either a selection of a text or read the text from top to bottom using their different reader tools. So that's, one, I always said that's kind of like a beginning transition. They have now software out there such as Supernova, which is from Dolphin Access Systems, and that has not only magnification, but it also has a full screen reader. Likewise with Freedom Scientific's product, which is called Fusion. It has both Zoom Text and JAWS, the screen reader, included in it. So what the difference between the speech there is that it tells you everything. So even as something is loading up on the screen, I hear every morning Microsoft Teams is loading when I've clicked on the icon, or actually I enter on it using keyboard commands. And so it's telling me everything that's happening on the computer. So it can be very verbose. You can change the verbosity I like to leave it on the most verbose because I've learned to tune it out and only hear what I need to hear. But some people that are actually very proficient, very, very, very fast typists, for example, may not like having that much information. So there are ways to adjust the amount of things that are spoken, but typically out of the box, you're going to get the beginner mode, which is going to give you everything read to you on the screen. So it's going to read the menu bar, ribbon bar, I used to say menu bar, the ribbons. It'll read any type of communication dialog boxes, for example, between you and the computer. On the Windows computer, the built-in screen reader that's there is called Narrator. They do have a magnifier as well, and you can use them both together. That wasn't the case some time ago. Likewise, on the Apple, the built-in screen reader is VoiceOver, and they also have the Zoom, which is their magnifier on there. Now they do play nice together, but 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. So you had to make a choice, either use Zoom or use VoiceOver. But now it does track the cursor now fairly well, even if the screen is enlarged. So things have gotten a lot better, what's built on there. So what a screen reader means, I can actually use my computer without the monitor on. And I've done that, in demonstrations when I use my desktop computer. So it is entirely possible to run a computer using just a screen reader, whether it be Narrator, VoiceOver, or, again, software like Supernova or JAWS for Windows that'll have this screen reader. Another screen reader that's free is also it's called Non-Visual Desktop Access, NVDA. And that is a free software that originally it did some things very well, but it wasn't the same as buying, say, a JAWS for Windows. But now it's really come along. It is free, it's open source, and they're always coming out with new updates for it. So it has gotten a lot better. Likewise with Narrator on VoiceOver always has been pretty good on the Mac, but Narrator in the past 3 years has made remarkable strides. It used to be, I used to say it's the fail-safe when your screen reader dies and you need to shut down your computer. You could turn Narrator on and get out of trouble. But now it's actually a very usable screen reader. So to use a Narrator, if you have a Windows computer, you can test it. You can toggle it off and on. And that is the Windows key, Control and Enter will turn on Narrator. And then likewise, it'll toggle it back off. So when people are trying out, for example, when they said they want to test a document for accessibility, or if they want to test their website for accessibility, I encourage them to either turn on VoiceOver on the Mac computer or toggle on Narrator on the Windows computer. And it gives them a general idea what kind of information is provided by the screen reader and what might be missing if indeed your document or your, again, website, for example, is not accessible. So, that's what a screen reader is.
I feel like we could have a whole session on screen readers.
And I know, yeah. And I could unplug and you can hear my JAWS for Windows, but frankly, I don't think you want to right now.
I will say, in the times that I have tried practicing using a screen reader, it is equal parts excruciating and fascinating. So I recommend for everyone to try it out sometime, but you should know ahead of time how to get out of it, because otherwise you might get stuck and that will be, and you have to call Julian. So I'll say, make sure you know how to get out of it.
And again, a lot of times they're rare, especially the ones that are built on, they're easy to toggle off and on. So, but going on the, I wouldn't mention though about using the mobile devices. We all rely on gesture commands, and that's the same thing with screen readers on your mobile devices. That they do use gesture commands, although I call them exaggerated. So, for example, I use when you want to go from to one page to another, say on your iPhone. Likewise with, I guess, Android. You need to use, you would get one finger to swipe from one way to, from one page to the next. Well, with VoiceOver on, either you have to look at your finger on the toward the bottom of the screen and flip up to move up to the next page, or you actually can get 3 fingers and swipe across the page to move to the next page. So there are, again, I call them exaggerated commands. They're similar, but they're a little bit more, you'll have to learn other new commands to go along with using the screen reader on these mobile devices. But again, I always say if you're connected to a Wi-Fi and you've got Siri, that's your fail safe. You can have Siri turn it off and on.
That's very true.
There's also accessibility shortcuts on it too. But there's a lot of really cool built-in features in a lot of these mobile devices with the screen reader that allows me to quickly adjust to, again, volume speech that perhaps may be a little more challenging for somebody who did not have VoiceOver on. So sometimes I say there's a little bit of advantage sometimes not looking at the screen. You can actually turn on, number one thing that people make mistake. And so Alana, if you do this, don't panic.
Okay.
When VoiceOver's on, they accidentally turn the screen curtain on. So it's a black screen, but the phone's still talking to you in VoiceOver. Right. I think I said 1 out of 5 students I've worked with, that'll happen to them and they'll complete panic. One took them to the Apple store saying, wait, I got to turn my phone back in because it's broken. They said, no, it's not. It's just the screen curtain's on. But it can happen.
Practice, it's 8:33, so I want to say that I will, respect everyone's time, but I will say on our way out, Julianne, do you have a number one tool that you use in the kitchen? Someone asked this. So on our way out,
in the kitchen,
as a goodbye question, what is your number one kitchen tool? No pressure.
Can I give you 2?
Yeah, you can give me 2, yeah.
Okay. I rely heavily on our Amazon Echo Friend for timers. I do use that. I actually have gotten recipes from our friend too. So that's one device. I also have a talking microwave. Now I have a really old one. Hamilton Beach made it, and it was only a limited series apparently because you can't get it now, which is a shame because I got it through Walmart. It was less than $100. So I use my talking microwave all the time. So the buttons, announce, and it's just a kind of a quick. It's not. I can't do any fancy cooking, as I like to say. But I do that with the microwave. Now, there is one out there called Magic Chef makes one that's fully, has full features that are talking. However, that's over $300. So it's not in the budget right now, but they're my favorite cooking things.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So thank you, everyone. I will send out all these links that I'm asking you to fill out. And I will send out this recording when I can get it captioned and some visuals as well. And if you have any follow-up questions for Julianne, feel free. Julianne, if it's okay, I'll share your email in my
please.
Yeah.
And again, I'd be happy to help put together some visual slides if you want.
Oh, cool.
Again, I was trying to, I always hesitate whether I want to put a full PowerPoint presentation in because at the end of the day, people are like, that's the last thing I want to do is sit and look at a PowerPoint. So I kind of left it as a conversation, but
totally
I'd be happy to put some stuff together.
No worries. Awesome. So feel free to reach out. I'm going to just put my email in the chat one more time so you have it. So a reminder that we're off next month and I will see you in October. Is that possible? Oh my God. Okay. So happy Halloween. And thank you so much to Julianne. And I'll see you all soon. Thanks for being here.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.